The soft glow of gas lamps, a gentle murmur in the Parisian night, a whispered promise of connection across a city under siege. This is not the story of grand battles or defiant speeches, but of a different kind of courage, a quiet resilience woven into the very fabric of daily life. It is the story of how ordinary people, facing extraordinary circumstances, created an invisible network, a lifeline of words and sentiment, navigating the darkness of war through the ingenuity of the underground mail. To truly understand how this delicate system, this intricate tapestry of ink and paper, sustained a beleaguered populace, we must first examine its origins, the fertile ground upon which such a remarkable endeavor took root. The Franco-Prussian War, a conflict that would irrevocably alter the European landscape, began with a series of... The immediate trigger was the Hohenzollern candidacy, a dispute over the Spanish throne that Prussia skillfully leveraged to its advantage, portraying France as the aggressor. On July 19, 1870, France declared war, a declaration met with an initial wave of patriotic fervor, a potent but ultimately fragile sentiment that would soon be tested by the brutal realities of Prussian military superiority. The Prussian army, a finely tuned instrument of war, forged through years of systematic reform and modernization, possessed a significant advantage in terms of organization, training, and artillery. The French military, while valiant, suffered from outdated equipment, inconsistent leadership, and a lack of cohesive strategy. Within weeks, the initial optimism of the French public began to wane as news of battlefield defeats filtered back to Paris. The Battle of Gravelotte on August 18, 1870, proved to be a particularly devastating blow, crippling French forces and paving the way for the Prussian encirclement of Paris. By September 18, 1870, the Prussian forces had successfully completed the investment of the capital. The city, home to over 2 million inhabitants, was now cut off from the rest of France and the world. Supplies dwindled, communication lines were severed, and a pervasive sense of isolation settled over Paris. The French government, now a national defense government, found itself besieged, its authority increasingly challenged by the surrounding enemy and the growing anxieties of its citizens. The initial burst of patriotic enthusiasm gave way to a grim determination to endure, but the psychological toll of being cut off was immense. It was within this context of isolation and uncertainty that the extraordinary resilience of the Parisian spirit began to manifest. The need for communication, for news from the outside, for contact with loved ones became paramount. The conventional postal service, of course, was entirely disrupted. Mail could not enter or leave the besieged city. This created a void, a silence that threatened to deepen the despair. Yet it was precisely this silence that spurred innovation, that nurtured the seeds of the underground mail system. The concept of sending mail through unconventional means was not entirely new. Throughout history, besieged cities had attempted various methods of communication, from carrier pigeons to balloons. Paris in 1870–71 would harness these existing ideas and, crucially, adapt them to the specific challenges of its unique situation. The initial efforts to bypass the Prussian blockade were, in many ways, experimental, born out of necessity and a desperate hope. The most visible and perhaps romanticized method of communication from besieged Paris was the use of balloons. From September 23, 1870 onwards, a fleet of balloons known as the aerostats began to ascend from the city, carrying mail and sometimes even passengers. These were often daring flights, navigating treacherous winds and the ever-present threat of Prussian artillery and observation. The Poste Aérienne, as this service was officially known, operated with a remarkable degree of efficiency for its time. Mail was collected, sorted, and entrusted to balloonists, many of whom were skilled aeronauts and experienced professionals. The process involved careful planning, precise meteorological assessments, and a degree of luck. Each balloon carried a limited payload, so mail had to be meticulously selected, often prioritized by urgency or official importance. The weight of the mail was a critical factor, and in some instances, letters were reduced to their bare essentials, their messages condensed to fit within the limited capacity. The balloons carried dispatches from the government, vital information for the provinces, and, importantly, private correspondence. The sight of these fragile vessels rising above the besieged ramparts became a symbol of defiance and hope for the Parisians, a tangible sign that the city was not entirely cut off from the world. When a balloon successfully landed outside the Prussian lines, the mail it carried was then transferred to the regular postal network, allowing messages to reach their intended destinations. Conversely, mail from the outside world was sometimes collected and flown back into Paris, though this was a far less frequent and more perilous undertaking. The aerostats, while a vital component of the communication network, were only one part of a larger, more intricate system. The true, underground aspect of this mail system involved methods that utilized the very terrain and infrastructure of the besieged city and the ingenuity of its inhabitants. These methods were often clandestine, operating beneath the notice of the Prussian occupiers. One of the most significant elements of this underground system was the use of carrier pigeons. While balloons carried bulk mail and official dispatches, pigeons offered a more direct and often faster means of communication for smaller, more urgent messages. The French had a well-established pigeon post system prior to the war, and this expertise was quickly adapted for the besieged city. A network of pigeon lofts was established within Paris, and trained pigeons were released from the city, carrying microfilm copies of dispatches. These pigeons would fly to predetermined locations outside the Prussian lines, where they would be recovered and their precious cargo delivered. The process of preparing mail for pigeons was a marvel of miniaturization. Documents, newspapers, and even lengthy letters were photographed onto incredibly small pieces of film. These films, often no larger than a postage stamp, were then carefully attached to the pigeons' legs. The pigeons themselves were specially trained to find their way home, often over considerable distances and through challenging terrain. The recovery of these pigeons was a crucial step, and a dedicated corps of pigeon keepers and recovery teams worked tirelessly to ensure that the messages reached their destination. The sheer volume of information transmitted via pigeon post was astounding. By the time the siege was lifted, hundreds of thousands of dispatches had been sent in this manner, covering a vast array of topics, from military intelligence to personal greetings. However, the pigeons and balloons, while essential, could not account for every communication need. There were still gaps, still moments when messages needed to travel through channels that were less visible, less reliant on the open sky. This is where the truly underground and often less documented aspects of the mail system come into play. The French military and civilian authorities recognized the critical importance of maintaining communication with the occupied territories and with friendly forces operating outside the Prussian encirclement. This led to the development of clandestine courier routes, often utilizing the vast and intricate railway network that still existed, albeit under strict Prussian control. These routes were not official postal services in the conventional sense. They were operated by individuals willing to take considerable risks, acting as human couriers. These couriers, often disguised as civilians, would attempt to blend in with the limited movement of goods and people allowed by the Prussians. They would carry small, concealed packages of letters, documents, or even money. The routes were dangerous, fraught with the constant threat of interdiction, arrest, or worse. The success of these missions depended on a combination of audacity, cunning, and often the complicity of individuals within the occupied zones. The Prussians, while controlling the main thoroughfares and official communication channels, could not possibly monitor every single interaction or every individual. This provided opportunities for subtle acts of subversion, for the clandestine passage of information. A farmer bringing produce into the city might carry a hidden letter. A traveler ostensibly moving between towns might be delivering vital intelligence. These were often acts of individual bravery, driven by patriotism or a deep sense of duty. The use of tunnels and sewers, though often romanticized and perhaps exaggerated in popular imagination, also played a role, albeit a limited one, in the communication efforts. While it is unlikely that a regular postal service operated through these subterranean networks, there are accounts of individuals using them to move small, vital items or to convey messages discreetly. especially in areas where surface movement was heavily restricted. The sheer immensity of the Parisian sewer system, a marvel of 19th century engineering, provided a ready-made network of hidden passages, a labyrinth that could be navigated by those familiar with its depths. Furthermore, the concept of letter carriers extended beyond those employed by any official organization. Among the besieged population, a spontaneous network of trusted individuals emerged, willing to act as intermediaries. A message entrusted to a neighbor who was venturing to a different part of the city, or to a contact in a less restricted zone, could find its way through these personal connections. This created a web of informal communication, a testament to the human desire to remain connected in the face of isolation. The sheer volume of mail handled by these various methods is difficult to quantify precisely, especially for the unofficial channels. However, the Postes Aériennes alone handled an estimated 2.5 million letters during the siege. The pigeon post transmitted an enormous number of dispatches, far exceeding the capacity of the balloons. The clandestine courier routes and informal networks, while largely undocumented, undoubtedly facilitated a significant flow of communication, sustaining morale and facilitating the coordination of resistance efforts. The content of this underground mail was as varied as the people who sent it. There were official government dispatches, military intelligence, and reports on the state of affairs, but more importantly, there were personal letters filled with love, longing, and reassurance. Families separated by the siege poured their anxieties and hopes onto paper, their words a fragile bridge across the chasm of war. Soldiers wrote to their wives and children, expressing their courage and their yearning for home. Civilians shared news of shortages, of rationing, and of the daily struggles of life under siege. These personal messages, often imbued with a poignant earnestness, reveal the human cost of the conflict and the enduring power of human connection. The process of writing these letters was often an act of defiance in itself. In a city where food was scarce and the sounds of bombardment were a constant presence, the simple act of composing a letter, of putting pen to paper, was a way of asserting normalcy, of reclaiming a part of life that war threatened to extinguish. The paper itself was often precious, salvaged from remnants or carefully rationed. Ink was homemade, derived from available materials. The act of writing, therefore, carried an added significance, a tangible expression of resilience. The sorting and delivery of this mail within the besieged city also presented its own set of challenges. While the aerostats and pigeons brought mail into Paris and couriers attempted to move it out, the distribution within the city itself relied on a more conventional, albeit strained, postal infrastructure. However, even this was impacted by the siege. Postal workers, like everyone else, faced the difficulties of food shortages, constant danger, and the disruption of daily life. Yet, they continued their work with remarkable dedication, ensuring that the precious messages that did arrive were delivered to their intended recipients. Navigating the darkened streets and the ever-present dangers, the financial aspect of this underground mail system was also noteworthy. While official government dispatches were often part of the state's communication efforts, private correspondence required payment. The creation of special postage stamps and cancellations for the aerostats and the pigeon post served both to generate revenue for the postal service and to mark the unique nature of these wartime communications. These stamps, often featuring symbolic imagery or the emblems of the Republic, have become highly sought-after collector's items, tangible relics of this period of ingenuity. For the clandestine courier services and informal networks, payment was often a matter of informal arrangement or mutual trust. The Prussians, for their part, were aware of the attempts to communicate with the outside world. They maintained patrols, conducted searches, and attempted to intercept balloons and pigeons. However, the sheer scale of the city, the ingenuity of the Parisians, and the vastness of the surrounding countryside made complete interdiction impossible. The Prussian efforts to control communication were a constant game of cat and mouse, a testament to the persistent desire of the besieged to remain connected. The story of the underground mail system is not one of dramatic, heroic rescues in the vein of battlefield combat. Instead, it is a story of quiet perseverance, of meticulous planning, and of the unwavering human need to connect. It is a narrative woven from the threads of individual bravery, collective ingenuity, and the enduring power of the written word. The balloons that ascended into the sky, the pigeons that flew with their precious cargo, the couriers who braved dangerous routes, and the countless individuals who acted as intermediaries, all contributed to a vital lifeline that sustained the spirit of Paris during its darkest hours. The eventual lifting of the siege in January 1871, while marking an end to the immediate hardship, did not erase the legacy of this communication network. The experience of being cut off and the subsequent efforts to re-establish contact left an indelible mark on the collective memory of Paris and France. The ingenuity displayed during the siege became a symbol of French resilience and resourcefulness. The French underground mail system, during the Franco-Prussian War, 1870 to 1871, is a powerful testament to the human capacity for adaptation and innovation when faced with adversity. It highlights how even in the face of overwhelming military might and physical isolation, the desire for connection, for information, and for the reassurance of loved ones can forge remarkable pathways of communication. It is a history that, in its meticulous detail and its quiet determination, offers a profoundly soothing and endlessly fascinating glimpse into the unyielding spirit of humanity. The intricate mechanics of the balloon launches, the precise training of the carrier pigeons, the clandestine arrangements of the couriers, the careful rationing of paper and ink, and the personal narratives contained within each precious letter. All these elements combine to create a rich and detailed tapestry of human endeavor. It is a reminder that history is not solely made on battlefields, but also in the quiet corners of besieged cities, in the steady hands that write, and in the determined journeys of those who carry words across the silence.